Welcome into another edition of Kickin It. I'm Jeff Woody. I'm here with Grant Mahoney. We are, as always, brought to you by Kelderman Manufacturing, kelderman.com. A lot of good stuff in there. Before we start with anything and intro this, I hope that, just sending best wishes to those in Northwest Iowa and West Iowa and in Eastern Nebraska. I would imagine that's the same thing. There's a lot of stuff going on there. I imagine there's a way to get involved and get help and provide help to that. I hope, if there's nothing else, if people can listen to this and get a little bit of fun from it, then that's something that I can hope happens. So, best wishes, prayers, thoughts to Northwest Iowa and just the flooding that went on there. If you can help in some way, I don't know how. I don't have a link, Aiden. Maybe there is a way to get some type of like a GoFundMe or something like that. But if there is a way to help, Cyclone Fanatical, try and do as much as we can do that. But best wishes before we start anything, Northwest Iowa, Godspeed up there. That being said, we have a little behind the curtain. I think we already said this, but we always do the interview first because we want to know how long to make the actual intro itself and kind of what to stay away from and what to do. Dude, I'm still excited from the interview that we already did that we're previewing into, and it is Paul Rhoads. God bless Paul Rhoads.
You can't say anything bad about the man. He's just a godsend, and I said it in the podcast. I would not have wanted to play for anybody else other than him. And he really helped shape me and a few people on our roster, including at least one person we've already interviewed, into becoming a better man.
Yeah. So, and we get into how he got to Iowa State, him working with McCarney, the things that he remembers from it, the things that he regrets from it. And, candid, if nothing else, for Paul Rhoads. So without any further ado, this one is a little bit longer. So you're looking at this one saying an hour and some change and whatever the recording ends up being. But it is well worth it. So this is Paul Rhoads here on Kickin It. And this one was fun.
All right. So our guest this week, he was a mastermind behind some of the greatest victories in Iowa State football history, including a win that blew up the BCS. He's a man who's made a huge impact in our lives and someone we have an immense amount of respect for. We've previously interviewed Jeff's position coach. This week, we have the honor and privilege of interviewing my position coach, who just happened to be the head coach of our team while we were there. Head coach Paul Rhoads. Coach, how you doing?
I'm doing very well. Nice to be on with you guys.
Yeah, we appreciate you jumping on. One question right off the bat that I wanted to ask you is, while you're at Iowa State, you were you took a lot of risk. We did a lot of fakes, a lot of fake field goals, a lot of surprise on sides. Some people called you the riverboat gambler. Where did that come from? And why do you feel like you were so I love that, by the way. I loved playing for you because I loved having fakes in and the opportunity to run them.
And as someone who's not a kicker, who's participating in the special teams of that, it was always fun because it was never, we're running this fake because we're running this fake, damn it. It's always because number 36 always overcommits inside the D gap. And if he overcommits inside the D gap, then there's where this fake is going to be. So it was always intelligent and aggressive.
Yeah. So I guess my question for you is, where did that come from, and why were you so, aggressive in calling fakes?
Yeah, number of reasons where it came from. I think first, you mentioned to start your position coach. I wanted to be involved, and I made the decision when I interviewed Wally Burnham for the defensive coordinator job. One of the questions he asked me was, how much are you going to be involved? How much scheme wise? How much are you going to sit in? And I told him it's your defense. I'm going to stay out of your way. And then I purposely stayed out of that room. I did not want to be in and out. I did not want Wally and the staff to think I was looking over their shoulder and ready to change things. But I needed something to do. I'm not an offensive coach. I wasn't going to get in their way and try to start doing something on that side of the ball. So I chose to be involved with specialists and the special teams. So, you're going to be the first to say, Grant, I was no genius when it came to techniques and that. I was a fundamental guy. I could watch you and I could observe you doing the things that you told me you should be doing, whether you were doing them right or wrong, and then I could coach off of that. So to that extent, that's what I was doing with you guys, and I enjoyed that room. I enjoyed our meetings and our chance to watch film together. But you guys both know I sat in on every special teams meeting and contributed to the basic scheme, and then I coordinated all anything we did from a trickery standpoint, from a fake standpoint. I coordinated that. And Jeff, as you said, I never felt I was gambling. If sometimes I may take a risk situationally. West Virginia, we executed a fake on 4th and 20 or something ridiculous like that, and converted it. So that situation was a little bit iffy, but it was the right time of the game. We needed something to jumpstart us. At that point, was the largest comeback in the history of Iowa State football. I don't know if it still is or not, but I knew it was a good fake. I didn't know if it would go for 20 some. It went for 20 and an inch or whatever we needed. We just made it. But I always had a great feeling about the fakes we ran, including the fake against Nebraska in overtime. That was there. It was open. We just missed on the execution of it, and anything else that we failed in those attempts. It was generally some reason behind execution, and not that it wasn't open or the scheme was there. So when I took the job at Iowa State, I felt we needed to be unique in places. I knew we had to be tough. I knew we had to be fundamental. But I thought there were going to be times that we were going to need an advantage in games. And I thought special teams and some of those fakes were a way to gain an advantage. And you can look back at several of those games and answer that we did.
Yeah, and I mean the onside kicks. Anytime Jeremy Reeves was on one side, Grant would kick Jeremy Reeves.
Well, one thing with that too is I don't know if the I guess average fan probably wouldn't pay attention to this, but anytime I think most times we would call fake onsides, our sideline was to the right, and I don't know if you know this, Jeff. Coach Rhoads would stand at about 11 yards, and he would, in practice, we worked on this. He would basically say, "Kick it to me," and so
I think I remember that because there was like the hands drill and the cover drill. I was on both of those units, and so there was always the same target.
Yep. And so in the game, if you go back and watch, I just watched the highlights from Texas in 2010, I think. Coach Rhoads was right at 10 yards, 11 yards. And I remember in that week, leading up to Texas, every time we saw that guy was gone. Like when I was within 2 yards of approaching the ball, gone. And then sure enough, Jeremy Reeves was wide open. It was just an easy, boop, just kick it to him. And
that kid's still running. He doesn't have any idea.
He was out. He was gone.
Yeah, that was a game that was a no-brainer. They were going to have no chance in that one, and that was not a big part of that victory, but it was still fun to get on that particular Saturday. You had to be able to kick the ball, and Grant, you could. You were phenomenal at the touch and the placement of that kick, and 3 yards too far, 3 yards too short, et cetera. We weren't going to be able to get those balls. And when we moved on to other kickers, we didn't have the same consistency at the kick. So I went away from it. I just didn't feel as good about it.
Yeah. And Oklahoma State in 2011, when we beat them, they were ready for it. And I can't remember who, I think it was maybe Dion, who was the second guy in, and his job was to go and get that guy basically who I was kicking to. And that guy was ready for it. And
that was right at a half, wasn't it?
We had just scored. I'm not sure if it's right at a half. We had just scored. And
it was second half. They had taken momentum. I think they'd gone up 10 at one point. Then we came back and scored. And that place was electric right before that onside kick. I mean, it was lit up. And they had, you said they knew it was, they had told the kid on the sideline, it is coming now. And they practiced it. He'd been coached on what to do. It was a simple fair catch was all he was going to do. And then we would have been dead. And he did. He took gas and didn't call the fair catch. And the kick was perfect. And was a Jansen, I believe, that recovered that one, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that one might have been, because Jeremy had a bunch, but I think that one was Jansen.
Yeah,
the guy though that was, and not to keep beating on the point, but that guy he was ready for it, and he saw it coming, and just shit his pants and got blown up, and then our guy Jansen was right there to get it. So
boy, Dion.
Hey, we can talk like that.
yeah.
On the show. Okay.
Oh yeah, yeah. We got if you get the F ones, Aiden will just throw a duck on top of it, or just leave it going. We had Yancey on.
There's an E next to the title.
Yeah, we had Yancey on. I think swearing is fine. Okay, so you mentioned not to go back too far. So you mentioned when you were hiring Wally, one of the things that to me is really interesting, and I think a lot of people don't have necessarily as much of an idea on how the mechanics of it work. So we can get back to the you being at Iowa State the first time, but you get hired as the Iowa State head coach. How do you go about filling out a staff from scratch? Because you got hired late, right? Because I think Coach Chizik bounced like when you were getting wings at the UDCC and you found out about it on ESPN. And then I think you got hired in December of 2008, and the recruiting, like February is when signing day, there was only one of them back then. It's February's signing day. So you have to hit the ground running, both with filling out a staff, having that staff recruit, and getting everybody signed. Can you walk the fans through the tornado that goes from, there's not like an Indeed link that's like, click, submit my application, from the desire to be the head coach at Iowa State, getting hired, filling out a staff, and then filling out the roster in the first recruiting class? How was that whirlwind of a few months?
How long is the show?
we got as long as you want.
I mean, you've heard about drinking out of a fire hose. That's what it is. When you take a job of that magnitude, you take it over, and everything you just said, Jeff, as far as the hiring, the recruiting, it's all on you now. And timing wise, it's still somewhat similar. You're on the road in December for a certain number of weeks, and then you break for Christmas and bowls and so forth. And then you go back on the road in January, right up basically until signing date, few days before it. And then you're off. And the hire date December was pretty much done. So we did not have the opportunity to go out on the road in December. It was guys that I had retained myself. We were on the phone with guys that were committed and immediately started to work that part of the recruiting. Gene had done a nice job. Gene had done a nice job with the guys we inherited that were already in the program, and he'd done a nice job with that class. Had a conversation with the administration about those that were committed to us. And we were to keep them. We didn't have a choice of letting them go. They were ours, and we still evaluated to see what we had, to see what we needed with what we had left. But they were ours, and we had to go after them. We had to make sure that we could keep them. I'll give you one example. AJ Klein was my first in-home visit.
Turned out to be a good one.
Myself going off campus, flew in on the King Air into Kimberly, Wisconsin, went and saw him, ate dinner with his family. And he was, Iowa was courting him amongst other schools, and they were trying to get him flipped. Had a great in-home visit, and he solidified his commitment to us. And then we just had to finish up strong with him, and that visit took place in January. So that was going on with everybody that had already committed to Iowa State, and to Gene Chizik and his staff. And as I got guys hired, then they became a part of that. The visits, off-campus visits to see them, they were all committed. So I think every one of those guys had already been on campus. We couldn't bring them back. It was just a matter of us going to see them. You talked about the hiring process. So I was at Auburn, where Gene went. I was at Auburn as the defensive coordinator. Tommy Tuberville got let go. That could be a whole other show too on what took place down there. But Tommy got let go, and Gene gets the job, and I immediately try to get involved in the Iowa State job. Well, I get a call from the headhunter. I was at the facility at the time, walked outside the building to talk to the headhunter, and he said, "Would you be interested in interviewing for the head coaching job at Iowa State?" I said, "Let me think about it. I'm unemployed right now. I don't have a job. I think I would be interested in the job. Obviously, it had nothing to do with being unemployed, but it was a silly question to ask a man who didn't have a job whether he would be interested in interviewing for a head coaching job. So that's where it started.
Yeah. Who grew up 30 minutes south of the school that you wanted to apply for? I don't know, right. Maybe.
So that's where it started. And not to get overly heavy on the details, interviewed in Atlanta with a number of other guys, was fortunate to get to a second round and ultimately get the job. Jamie has always been very secretive, protective, however you want to say it, with his hires. And from the very beginning, I was instructed by the headhunter, nobody is to know. And it was my wife and I. And as you say, I grew up there. Mom, dad, sisters, brother, friends, so forth. So it wasn't hard because I wanted the job bad and I wasn't going to screw it up by telling somebody. But I was in Ames, Iowa, and I was in Jamie Pollard's basement before I was able to let anybody know. The boys came home from school. Car was packed. We said, "Hey, we're taking off to Ames." Dad got the Iowa State job. They didn't have phones at the time, I don't believe, but so they were no communication with your nephews and so forth. Get there, get the job. The announcement day is a crazy day as far as interviews and in-person phone. It was timed up with a basketball game, so we went to the arena, and in the meantime, I got hires to make. I got to look at the roster. I got to figure out all this stuff, but all the other stuff has to be done. Our offensive line coach, Bill Blyle, was the first hire. I knew if I ever was fortunate to have the opportunity to be a head coach, I was going to bring him. It was quick and fast, and he was on the road. Another Iowa native that was a part of that first staff. Chris Ash, I believe, was the second hire. Another Iowa guy who'd had Iowa State ties. That was and is an exceptional football coach, good recruiter, and I knew I wanted somebody that I would be confident in the secondary, which was sort of my area of expertise. So wanted to bring him in. He wanted out of San Diego. That was a fast hire too. And then it was a process from there. And the longest process was the defensive coordinator process with Wally. I'd gone after some guys and didn't have luck. And then I needed help from Dan McCarney to help convince Wally to make the change and make the move. And being able to hire his son with him was a piece that certainly sweetened that pot and allowed us to get them both.
Yeah, I mean, just rock star hires there, especially just from a people standpoint. Because I think one of the things, this is not necessarily a comment expected, but in the recruiting process, and so this is throughout the entire whirlwind. So the class that you were talking about, the AJ Klein class, I was part of that very first class, but I was a walk-on through that, and the Chiswick staff had made the determination they were going to offer me a preferred walk-on spot, and which is essentially at that time, and I imagine it's still about the same, which is you have all the rights and privileges of a scholarship player just without the education. So you get to come to camp, you get a locker spot, you don't have to try out, you're on the team.
Well,
so
you still get the education.
Well, yeah, I mean, you just have to pay for it.
You don't go to school.
You got to go to school. You just have to.
Yeah, you're paying the bills.
Yeah.
So in the recruiting process, one of the, I've said this on here before, probably not to you, but the entire reason I came to Iowa State was because you were honest. So it was in the recruiting process, as all of us here know, there's a lot of snake oil that gets thrown everywhere. It's other universities in the state, which shall not necessarily be named, I was getting a walk on from basically everywhere. And my dad, who's an Air Force wrestler, construction worker, would ask directly to whatever coach, once they said, we're going to give you a walk-on spot, why is my son not getting a scholarship? And all the other coaches would dance around that question and say, well, I think you'd be a good fit here. And, we might try him at linebacker, and we think he'd be a great culture fit. And your response was, I've been on campus here for 3 weeks. I've had to hire coaches. I've had to go out and get the rest of the recruiting. I've only watched his highlight tape. Based on his highlight tape, I don't think he's fast enough to play recruiting or play running back at Division I. However, we will have open scholarship spots in the next couple of years, likely because of turnover. If he proves me wrong, he will get a scholarship spot. Straight, honest, to the point. And I think, so basically it was a commit on the spot, because that honesty was something I hadn't received. That's also something that stayed 100% true all the way through the rest of it. So sometimes you didn't want to hear it in the same, that direct, blunt honesty. But that was the number one characteristic that drew me to Iowa State, was your honesty and just, this is what it is. And that's a thing that, again, just as a personality trait that was just always there. So for me, the great thing about the hires that you made, one was that it kept that culture. There was not a lot of bullshit that lived on that staff. When you look at Wally, Herman, and Yancey as the tip of the iceberg on the coordinator front, and then you as the head guy, you didn't get a lot of sugarcoating the truth. You just got the truth. Now you cared, but you got the truth. So that was, I don't know, that to me, that was a really well done, even if it was a tornado, of just matching the personalities of the coaches to what you wanted it to be. And I don't know if that was a consideration that you had, or if it's just something you just happenstance into.
Oh, it was absolutely a consideration. I appreciate you saying those things, Jeff. I really do. That's how I was raised, right? The three of us are cut from very similar cloth, and how we were raised, how we grew up, the values of our state. I didn't know any other way to recruit or to act, and quite honestly, I think that's faded. You talked about the snake oil then, and you're talking about 2008, 2009. What about now with NIL and the portal? And we disciplined you guys. If you were out of line and you knew you were out of line, you were going to get up in the morning and you were going to be disciplined for it. That doesn't take place anymore. And you don't get the honest truth, as blunt as it may be at times, because coaches are afraid you're going to run out the door if you get the honest truth. So I appreciate you saying as much. And when I interviewed, it was, if I was interviewing a guy, he had the traits and qualities to coach at that level. That wasn't a question. I might want to know a little bit more about his teaching ability. I wanted him to teach me like he would teach a freshman. I wanted to see that. I wanted to evaluate that. But they had the knowledge and they had that talent. I wanted to know him as a person. I wanted to know their character. I wanted to know their background. I haven't kept a lot of things, but I have the interview books with the questions and with all those candidates, guys that got the job, guys that didn't get the job, that I exercised in hiring that first staff because it was so important to me. It's just something I've held on to. That's
pretty neat. And Jeff touched on it too. And, we talked with Yancey about this too. And one thing that I can probably speak for Jeff when I said we appreciate about you and Yancey and the staff you put together is you guys were fair, and you'd mentioned, you were disciplined. If you knew you messed up, you're going to be barrel rolling for 100 yards or doing whatever it might be. And, but at the end of the day, in between the lines, you guys were fair and hard asses when you need to be, but then outside, we kind of talked to Yancey about this, that Yancey was like, well, he's like, what am I doing on game days? He's like, I'm a strength coach. He's like, I'm just on the sidelines. So, I told him that, when we're in the weight room, when we're between the lines, you guys were coaching us and giving us discipline and being, treating us how we need to be treated. But then outside of that, you guys are very much, you were a father figure to me while I was in college. You guys were very, we could go to you for Jeff has said this about Coach Pope, could go to you for, personal issues or questions or anything outside of football. And I think that's one thing that we really appreciate about your staff, is that we really looked up to you guys and admired you guys. And the fact you guys were treating us with such respect and dignity in a time where you are molding young men into men. And it is really something that we needed, which, like you said, may not be there today, which sucks, because there were guys like Geyer could have left, and he he stuck around and I wasn't performing, as well as I should have been my senior year, and he got the opportunity to play. It was fair. He deserved the opportunity to play. So kind of getting sappy, but I that's one thing I really appreciate about, you and your staff you put together. And we like I said, we had echoed that to Yancey when we had him on. One question I wanted to have for you as well too is, you're a passionate guy. You wear your heart on your sleeve, and you're known for, I'm so proud after the Nebraska win, huge win for us. After the Oklahoma State win, you got emotional, and you'd said that you really appreciated the guys in the team because they bought in hook, line, and sinker. I'd mentioned it in the intro. You had orchestrated some of the largest wins in Iowa State football history that are still some of the largest wins in Iowa State football history. Being an Iowa guy and being, an emotional guy that you are, what did those wins mean to you as a head coach?
Let me finish up with what you talked about. Fair, honest, and consistent. That's what I hope you always got out of me, and that's what I wanted you to get out of the staff. To sum it up in 3 words, fair, honest, and consistent with how we treated you, whether it was in between the lines, as you said, or off the field with anything else that was going on in your life. You prepare, you coach, you scheme. You guys know it from a playing standpoint. In season's long, and game week is long. It's longer as a coach, just from a time standpoint, and it is physically grinding. You're not running sprints and all that, but it's a whole different kind of grind, and it's a long week. You're doing that to win every game, right? You're not doing that to lose a game. You're doing that to win every single game that you coach. You've got an understanding of where you sit, how their talent level versus your talent level, where you're at injury wise and all that, but you're still coaching to win, and to have the opportunity to motivate the players to understand that and appreciate it and attack every game in the same way, was what we were trying to accomplish, is what we set out to do. So when we got that done as a team, so staff, players, everybody involved, when we got that done and secured some of those large victories that you're talking about, they were very gratifying. I got so much respect for all the men that had been head coach at Iowa State, from Coach Campbell now to all the guys before me. I've said it before, I'll say it again. It's a challenging job. Without going into detail, it's a challenging job, and to pull off some of those wins, very gratifying. I came to Iowa State to stay. And I wanted to be a guy that accomplished things as a head coach there over time that had not been accomplished. We did in some ways, obviously not in the long term, but we did in some ways, and we still remain very proud of what we accomplished.
You helped kill the BCS, Coach. You shifted.
That helped.
You shifted college football forever.
5 turnovers helps. Is there, I don't know if you were necessarily going to ask this, are there any, so when we've talked with all the coaches and kind of the players, and we had guys like A-Rob and Steele and a whole bunch of other guys, and there's 3 games that kind of always pop up. There's Oklahoma State. There's 4. Well, there's, Oklahoma State, the Iowa triple overtime game, Nebraska, and then first time beating Texas. Are there any games, well, including those 4 or outside of those 4, that kind of stick out in your mind of like, that one is extra sweet, or that one is kind of pinned in the bulletin board of your memory that you just remember kind of pretty vividly? Are there anything, whether those 4 or otherwise, that kind of, I don't know, are rosy in your brain?
I don't hide from the fact that I love the rivalry. So every victory against Iowa was big. We finished up 3-4 in the 7 seasons that we were there. And we're an eyelash short in another game or 2 of getting wins. But every one of those was a special victory. initial victory was a fun game to win.
It was Northern Illinois, right?
North Dakota State.
Sorry, Northern Illinois is 09. Yeah. Or 2010.
North Dakota State. And we were without headphones for a good bit of that game from the very beginning. They went down, so we were operating off cell phones on
what?
sideline.
You didn't know that?
No, I was redshirt. I wasn't playing.
It was chaos.
Yeah, and that's when I was still trying to figure out the whole wearing the headphones as a head coach or not wearing the headphones as a head coach thing. So
I would be remiss. Sorry, you're talking about headphones. I would be remiss, especially on behalf of the fans. Did you pick the get back guy that you had that would pull on like your belt loop, and like did Wally get to pick the get back guy, or just was there an equipment guy who just holds your headphones? Like how was the selection process of that?
The equipment people picked who got those responsibilities. Yeah,
Okay.
I had nothing to do with it. I had nothing to do with it. And I had nothing to do with some backswings I took at him every now and then in the process of trying to get me back. So the wins are phenomenal, right? Whether it's the big four that you described or any others, but the losses stick with you too, and are extremely painful over time, and not hard to forget and hard to shake. The Kansas State game that ultimately put the final nail in the coffin of my time there. I still wake up in the middle of the night at times and in sweats and going over decisions and what took place in that game. I'd be lying if I didn't tell you that was the truth.
Yeah, understandable. I mean, we all have our own individuals that we're just not the coaches. We automatically graduate. We don't have we don't have a way of getting kicked off the team for making mistakes versus not performing to the level. The job is out on the line. So
you get benched, but
it's true. You can get benched. Yeah. I don't know
we had a mailbag episode last week, and people were asking us, what games could you go back and redo, or what, was there a kick that still haunts you or whatever. And so I can kind of get that, but I was like, yes, there are some games I wish I could go back where I did not play well and wish I could go back and redo those. So right now realignment is huge. You were also a head coach during some realignment
with the initial Big 12 missile crisis. Nebraska's leaving, A&M's leaving, Mizzou's leaving, Colorado's leaving.
Yeah. So I want to ask you, I'm sure that's probably a pretty chaotic time. What were your thoughts during that time, and how much would you say that impacted recruiting, if at all? Or is there kind of a different stance you had to, take to recruits and let them know, hey, we're not going to Mountain West or AAC?
Yeah. It certainly affected recruiting. I was at Pitt when it was the Big East, football playing Big East, and that was one of the earlier rounds. John Swofford was the commissioner of the ACC, and they came in and took Miami and Virginia Tech and Boston College to the ACC, and it was overnight. It was one of those deals. You had no idea it was coming. I mean, you went to bed and woke up the next morning and they were gone, type of deal. I've never forgiven that guy either for doing that and destroying a great football league. So that was my initial exposure to it, and saying, what are we doing? Why would we do things like this and destroy something that exists, is healthy and is in good shape? When that happened at Iowa State, when I was the head coach, we ended up over at Jamie Pollard's house.
Who's we?
And it was myself, Jamie, I think Bill Finley, and I don't know if that would have been Greg McDermott at the time. Shame I can't remember that, but and who was all there. But we ended up at his house, and it was devastating, right? I mean, it was where are we going? We better try to find a home right now before this thing completely blows up. So I don't want to get too in detail about what exactly those discussions were and who was in favor of what and so forth. but at that particular time, on that evening, we did not see the Big 12 as staying intact and Iowa State staying apart. We did not believe it was going to happen, and we wanted to find the best landing spot for Iowa State and its fans that we could. Things changed, and we were fortunate to be able to remain a part of it. But with the questions that went along with it, yeah, you're affected in recruiting who you're going up against, and the blue bloods are the blue bloods, and they're not going anywhere, and we weren't one of those, and our place did not look very stable. So you had to honestly talk around it and give them reasons why.
That's interesting too, because now you look and the ACC may be, falling apart, and the Big 12 might be one of the final three. But I have to imagine that recruits now, would prefer to go to a Big 10 or SEC school as opposed to, an ACC or Big 12 school. Because I'm sure those two, ACC and Big 12 probably look down upon, from Big 10 and SEC. We've talked a couple times about these stories. I'm going to relive for a second. I wanted to get your recollection of them, or what your thoughts were on them. I'm not sure if you know where I'm going with this. We talked to Yancey about the time that we were doing fourth quarter drills, and I stepped outside and took a dump. Jeff tried to corner Yancey, said, "You almost made Grant shit his pants," which is not the case. He did not make me shit. It's my choice. What was your thought when you I guess saw that on film, or when you first heard about it?
Yeah, the fourth quarter was what we felt was a huge part of our toughness.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And in our program and who we were, to the extent that those kinds of off-season programs, to the level that we executed it at, they don't exist anymore. They're not in place anymore, because again, it's too grueling. It's too hard.
That is wild.
And to run your guys through that, they fear that some place is doing it easier, and they'll be in communication with somebody and be ready to leave. But that was a building block. It was a cornerstone of our toughness and who we were as a football program. And it needed to be hard, and it needed to be consistent in who had to do what, and everybody was doing that to accomplish it. I don't remember the filming, to be honest.
Okay.
That we videoed everything and caught guys. Yancey might have been throwing some of those things out there, and he might not have. We very well could have. Now, we filmed everything about the workout, and we watched it as a staff, and we graded every single one of you on the ride. Every one of you.
Wow.
received a grade, and we went through those stations, and it was why. Well, why are they getting this grade and so forth? So, again, going back to another school, I guess that's just how I was raised. I saw a guy take a dump in a garbage can that was on the practice field to be used for throwing up and so forth, and he didn't want to miss a rep, so he dropped trowel and dropped and dropped a load in that trash can, so he didn't miss a rep and finished it. I always held him in higher esteem after he did that. So,
that is awesome.
Oh boy.
My second part of that question is, if you remember, I guess not shifting away from the
shitting and then wiping with a rock.
No, yes,
away from that.
Shifting away from that. If you remember, going into my senior year, I got hit by a car on my moped. Do you remember that? And I guess, what was your initial thought when I came to you and said, "Coach, I'm really drugged up right now"? I had my best practice. I don't think I missed a kick because I just was so loopy, just didn't care. And just, whoop. What was your thought when I came to you and said, "Coach, I'm coming from the hospital. I just got hit by a car on a moped"?
Well, yeah.
I remember you said, "Do you have a helmet?" I said, "No." You said, "Well, you might want to invest in one."
Yeah.
And I think you told the team after practice, "Hey, if you guys have mopeds, please get a helmet."
I think we made it a rule after that. We just moved our went up and helped our youngest son, Wyatt, move who at Louisville, he's a track and field coach at the University of Louisville. And we were going through one of his boxes, and he's got his old high school helmet in there, but it doesn't have the face mask attached. And I said, why are these nuts and screws not in here? He says, because we had to wear helmets to ride mopeds. And we were going to go out and buy, so we took our old football helmets that we had from high school, and we wore them as our moped helmets. So I think we did put a rule in that you weren't the only one that got hit by a doggone car or got in a wreck riding a moped in our time there, as you're well aware of. You gave me the circumstances, I guess. You told me what happened, that you've been a doctor, and as long as anything there wasn't prohibiting you from practice, it was time to get to work.
Yeah.
And so we needed to go practice.
Yeah, and I had a great practice. I was sore the next few days, but that day, I was feeling good. I was a little loopy. What else you got for him, Jeff?
Well, I think another thing that's interesting, and you mentioned McCarney. How did you get hooked up with McCarney in the first place? Because at this point, I feel like McCarney can walk into any room in Iowa with his personality and just everyone goes, I want to hang out with that guy, even if they don't know who he is. So I feel like everybody knows Dan McCarney. But how did you get hooked up with Mac in the first place? Because you were the secondary coach, right? Safeties?
I was actually linebacker coach.
Linebackers coach? Okay. So how did you get hooked up with Mac in the first place for your first stint at Iowa State?
Yeah. A long story that I'll try to shorten as much as I can. I was at a place called University of the Pacific, working for a gentleman by the name of Chuck Shelton, who was a former head football coach at Drake. Drake dropped football at one point, and Chuck left there and went to Utah State. I GA'd for him there, and then got my first full-time job at UOP. So I'd been there for 3 years, and got people passing by on the street. Our dog is on duty.
How dare they?
It was an opportunity to move up. They weren't referred to as Power 5 conferences at the time, but the Big 8 was a real deal conference, right? I'm at a place called the Big West, having a blast coaching football, but had an opportunity to go home for the first time and get a full-time job in my mid-20s at Iowa State in a Big 8 conference. So I hounded Mac. At every opportunity, and I caught a lot of breaks. Mac has never met a ringing phone that he wouldn't answer. And I got him at the office late at night because he picked the phone up when it rang. Could be the next Troy Davis at that time. There weren't very many hotels in town, and there was an old Ramada Inn. I'm not sure what sits there now, maybe Target or something, but there was an old Ramada Inn, and I'd go through the hotels where there was a chance that they could be staying, and I'd call on Dan McCarney's room, please, and they put me through.
That's great. Oh my God.
Yeah. I got his personal number from his he was going through a divorce at the time, and his wife. And now his ex-wife gave up his personal number. I got that from her. So I was beating Mac up, but he didn't know me. I was young, and it finally got to the point where no assistant jobs were left available. The only job he had was coordinator. And Mac, like we talked about before, as honest as the day is long, and he'd answer, he'd communicate, and told me that. And he'd missed on a couple guys, and I told him, well, there's a guy by the name of Larry Coyer who's available, and I think would love to coordinate for you. Larry had been Bob Cummings' coordinator at the University of Iowa. He'd worked at Iowa State as a coordinator under Donnie Duncan, so he'd been there. He had a history. He was as well respected as anybody in the country from a defensive mind standpoint. Mac ended up interviewing and hiring him. But the staff was full. There was a guy by the name of Jerry Azzanero, who was on that original staff that had come from UMass out in Massachusetts, and taken the job, was a linebacker coach, had gone through recruiting, and then got offered an opportunity to go to Boston College. Jerry's a New England guy, had come from there, had a chance to go back, was going to be a fairly seamless transition for him. And he took that job and went back, and Mac had an opening. I had been Larry Coyer's GA at Ohio State in 1991. Now a position job was open, a linebacker job was open, and he gave me a chance. Brought me in with certainly with Larry's blessing, and interviewed me and offered me the job. I called my wife, told her to send underwear and shirts, and never flew back to California. Took the job and stayed. And then a few weeks later, she packed everything and moved everything, and she arrived in Ames.
Wow.
That is incredible. I love the fact that you had to cold call Dan McCarney at a hotel through the receptionist and his ex-wife. Like, that's the way that I mean, the dominoes of history are wild and interspersed.
I think what's like maybe most shocking about that story is that the receptionist at the hotel was like, "Yeah, I'll put you through. No problem."
Yeah. Didn't think twice about it.
Yeah. What are we doing here?
Man, like the connection then between, like, you were at Iowa State, you go did a couple of the jobs, DC at Auburn, you started Iowa State. Are there any other logistical things that, like, being a head coach, because it's such a singular job, there are not a lot of other things, and there's basketball head coach for an NCAA program. I would imagine there's NFL head coach, and outside of that, there's not a lot of jobs in this country that are that level of both public facing, coaching, and then just a shitload of logistics. Is there anything about being a head coach that you just wish people understood better? Like, is there any just, I don't know, aspect of it that people tend to get wrong, whether it's on TV or the message boards or whatever?
Good question. First time head coach, right? You've got a plan. You're not going to get the job without a plan. More than likely, you've been a coordinator, so you've observed a lot of things. You know what you want to do going in. So I was never overwhelmed by decisions, hiring, recruiting, organizing practice, and loved every single bit of it. I think, and I don't know if it answers your question, but the one thing as a head coach that I wasn't prepared for is your door is revolving, and people never stop walking through it. Recruiting staff, assistant coaches, training staff, players, boosters, administrators, whatever it is, people never stop walking through your door. And as an assistant coach, coordinator or not, your day's football, especially in season. You're there, you whether it's your office or your offensive, defensive staff meeting rooms, you're in there and the film's running and you're putting together the plan and you're organizing practice. And you might occasionally have a player come by. And as you guys know, our doors were always open. Nobody was ever not to knock or tell a player that they couldn't see a coach at any particular time. But you were consumed with football. As a head coach, you get consumed with other things, more so than just what's going to take place in between the white lines, offensively, defensively, and special teams. And it doesn't matter if you delegate. Year 2, year 3, this will get easier. Gio handle this, Marcos will handle this. Operations guy. It doesn't change. It doesn't get easier the more you do it. And fault of mine, if you will, I did want to have hands-on most, if not all, decisions that were made in running the program. Not whether we were going to call a blitz or play zone, but in running the program. And so it was a little bit of my own victim as far as that goes. But that might be something that the outside fan would not be aware of.
One thing that I really appreciated about you, Coach, that Coach my freshman year didn't do. In practice, you would really you would bounce around to all the different position groups, and you would, just see, how they were doing. And if you could coach them up, I remember you would go to the DBs, which I feel like is maybe a natural position for you, being a DB in college yourself. And I remember you telling them, bend at your knees, not your waist, whatever it was you were telling them. And you really, back to having admiration for all the guys in the team. You really had just everyone's best interest in you. And you didn't care if it was a starter or the fourth guy on the depth chart. You want to make sure you're coaching them up. That's one thing that I really appreciate about you. Even with kickers too, like we would do tackling drills. Why the hell we have to have proper form? I don't know. I suppose we probably should know about it, but when you got an athlete coming at you, probably won't have proper form. I'm just going to go for his ankles. But I remember one time, Geyer will joke about this too. We were, whatever the drill was, you're standing facing each other, and then I'm the fake ball carrier, and I have to choose right or left. Then you tackle, head on the opposite side, whatever, and wrap up. And Zach was standing straight up, and remember you hopped on his back, and you bend at your knees, and Zach kind of bent down. You're like, more, and you wouldn't do it, so you hopped on his back. Bend more, Zach. I just appreciate that, because again, kickers, we're not going to have great form when it comes to tackling, but you want to make sure that you're at least coaching us to make sure.
You did. You're the best tackling specialist in the country.
You throw your little nose in there.
None of you ever turned it down, and when the opportunity came, you made tackles. So again, I wanted to be involved, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't. I wanted to make you tougher, and I want to be involved. And I didn't get a chance to coach tackling with the defense, so I was going to coach it with you. It was something that at some point you were likely going to have to do, whether it was a punting situation or a kicking situation. So you better be prepared for it, and you guys were, and we took great pride in that. I often joke, what's your role as a head coach as far as coaching? I said I coach them how to bend their knees, and I did. And as you said, I got that from Mac. Mac roamed the field every day, and I admired that, and I saw that. I thought that was a great trait as a head football coach.
I agree.
That he got around and didn't ignore anybody either. And on every one of those days, as you said, I went to every position group. Some maybe a little bit longer, but I watched every position coach. And I watched the players, and if you saw me, I took a lot of notes on things that might have been being coached and how they were being coached or said, or the effort of players, or players paying attention, whether they were running back to the back of the line or walking back to the back, those kinds of things that I despised. But I wanted to stay active and be around the team and coach that way. And I wanted them to see that. I think if you stand there in one spot with your whistle, you start losing credibility as a ball coach and what the players think of you. And and at the same time, I was the CEO. I did not coach a position. I did not, call a defensive player an offensive play. But I didn't want to lose respect as a ball coach.
No, that's something that I really respect you for, because like I mentioned, Coach Chiswick, my freshman year, and I'm not trying to dog on him, but he would just sit in his golf cart, and he also had back problems too, so I'll give him that. But he would just sit in his golf cart and just kind of supervise. Whereas I really appreciated you being a kicker. We got most of our stuff done before practice, and then just kind of dicked around throughout practice. Hike to the quarterback's catch from whatever it might be, but we weren't doing stuff for most of the practice.
Rush the passer in 7-on-7 drill.
That's right.
Hands up.
So I appreciate kind of more so being an observer of practice. I appreciate seeing you go from from group to group. We've kind of talked about it, and you had 2 stints at Iowa State, but I wanted to ask you too, looking at your entire time at Iowa State, what are some memories that really come to mind right off the bat, or just some things that when you think about your time at Iowa State, just jump right off the page to you?
Yeah, I think the fan base, they love their Cyclones, and they always have. But I think there was a time that it notched up, and I was there with Mac, and I was gone when they were playing for a championship, and the corners of Jack Trice were flat out empty, and there were many games that our corners were empty, and I think we helped notch that up, and helped contribute to that with the passion that you guys played with. And how our football teams played. I take great pride in that, and I'm happy for the fans with all the successes that Iowa State have, and the support they give. I hear from the fans. I still do. I get letters, and I love to respond to those, and what they thought of our time there. So that would be, you said as it pops into your head, that would be one. It was home for me.
Yeah.
And that was important. My mom was far along in Alzheimer's, and it ended up passing in 2011, and she has no idea in her earthly days that I was the head football coach at Iowa State, has no idea that ever took place. But I still got to be around her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Dad, brothers, sisters, family, Vicky's family, my wife's family. They came up to every home game. And my father-in-law was on the field. My mother-in-law was on the balcony. So it was a family affair for us. It's my home state. I'm very proud of it. So that was important to me, and something that I fondly remember. All the relationships with the players. These are of course in no order, but all the relationships with the players, the opportunity to reminisce, the opportunity to tell stories. You guys said you had Steele on and A-Rob on, and I James Smith works with my brother, and any opportunity. I mean, it gets back to me. So and so said this about his time there, and James Smith. I went in to see my brother when I was back to see my dad here recently, and James found out I was in the building. He grabbed me, brought me down to a group that he was instructing in the building. And talked about 2009 season and the things that we instilled. That's why I do what I've done over all these years. You stirred up a little passion. That's.
I don't think with your personality, coach.
That's why I've done it.
With your personality, coach, I don't think passion is that hard to come by, just because you can feel it the moment you are in the same room, is that you give a shit. Like that beyond any other thing. Like I know this is not to make this like two stories about me, but when Grant was talking about roaming around the field, I was more cognizant of like what I was doing at practice. Like I wasn't like, oh, what's Rhoads doing? So I was always paying attention.
In between playing golf in the indoor, I'd watch the coaches.
Yeah, you dick. Have nothing to do all day. But I remember the way that I got my scholarship, you were around for. And so I remember it was the fall camp of going into the 2010 season. I was still a walk-on, but I had worked my way up to be playing with the ones and the twos. There was like a 4th and 1 in a scrimmage or an inside drill that we were doing. They subbed me in for I don't remember who was in there. They subbed me in, and it's against the one. So it's AJ, Jake, I think Matt Taufo maybe was there. There might have been another Mike linebacker. I make somebody miss. I put my shoulder down into somebody, get a first down. And Bill Blyle goes, "That's what we pay you for, Woody." And you were like, Bill, we don't pay that one. I remember you had recalled that story in a meeting and then say, "We'd like to put you on scholarship." And like that moment will always just be seared into my brain. And you were there. Like it was a present and around. And so it's a thing that I just didn't even think about, that, hovering around, is that you get to be a part of those moments. And so, yeah, just the you're talking about stirring up passion, like just the give a shit level is so incredibly obvious that, like, I don't know, you can't not have that feeling when you're in a room or in a conversation with you. And
brick walls are not safe when Coach Rhoads is around.
I remember the play, and I remember the conversation when Bill yelled that, like it was yesterday.
Does it bring as much joy to you putting like in Jeff's case, a walk-on on scholarship as it does like us scholarship guys, when you have those meetings and you're putting someone on scholarship, that's like, for me, that's maybe a better feeling than, maybe not that great, but maybe a better feeling than beating Oklahoma State. Like seeing the guys you go to battle with every day who have just working their ass off, who are paying their way to get a scholarship. I can probably speak for other scholarship guys when I say like that for us was like super special to be on the team in those moments.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll go a step further that maybe might surprise you, but for every reason you just said, somebody that's been doing every single thing that everybody else has, but he's writing a check, his parents are writing a check. There's no benefit, if you will, that's coming his way. And we always did it in the team setting because of the appreciation of the teammates for us. Greatest thing you get to do as a head coach is exactly that. Providing a scholarship for a player that's already on the team. But a second thing that never got old was offering scholarships, period.
Yeah.
To high school players. We offered a few that probably never. We were Jake Knott's only Division I football offer like that.
Wow.
Amazing. He was a no-brainer. Amazing how he didn't have opportunities. But so, Jake wasn't. There were a number of guys that without that offer, they wouldn't have got it, and that never got old either. Golly, the money, the opportunity, that power that goes with the ability to be able to do that was something special, and it never got old.
Yeah, and there's a lot of guys too, like you mentioned, that without the Iowa State offer may not get to play at that level. One, and two, I remember there's a lot of guys in the team that when I was there who weren't coming from great situations and might have been the first guy who, was going to college and his family. It's like, yeah, and that's stuff that, as privileged as we are, that I don't even think about. That's like, man, to give a guy an opportunity to really potentially change the entire, trajectory of his family lineage is, that's got to be super special.
My favorite thing about recruiting is being on the road and being in families' homes and seeing that dynamic and having appreciation and learning exactly what you're talking about. And any coach that's done it for any length of time has been in extremes, right? They've been in one home and they've been in another home, and they're just different. And you talk about maybe the first son to go to college, let alone graduate. Those are being in that environment was my favorite thing about recruiting. It certainly wasn't phone calls and now Twitter and everything else that goes along with it. It was being face to face, sitting in a home, recruiting a player and his family.
For sure, I can imagine, and especially someone as genuine as you are, I can imagine that did go a long way.
I think, I don't know, that I feel like we've already been here for an hour, and if it doesn't feel like an hour. I think one other, not another thing, a thing that I would imagine is also just true. I remember, so your dad recently just passed away. Cecil is just the best, and like would always. I don't think he missed a practice. Did he miss a practice in like the entire, was it 7 or 8 years that you were there?
Well, he did, not a lot. The early years when Mom wasn't so healthy, he missed some. After she passed, probably didn't miss many after that.
Because I remember walking out to whatever field, whether it's Field of Dreams or practice at the Bergstrom, Cecil's right there, give you a handshake, grab you by the elbow, the same thing. Well, hey, have a good practice. Hey, whatever little word of encouragement. And I remember because, and I texted this to you after we went to, after we were at the visitation, because I had played at Southeast Polk and Cecil lived in Ankeny and was around and had kind of watched high school football in the area. He recognized me from Southeast Polk. And when I was a walk-on, as a walk-on redshirt, there is a whole lot of times, especially during camp, God bless it, during a walk-on redshirt camp, when you're the bottom of the depth chart and it's 500 degrees outside, the amount of times that you get in your head of like, I don't want to be here, this is stupid. the amount of times that, not necessarily at that moment, but like Cecil being around and being like, hey, you're a hell of a player. I remember, you had this one time when you were playing against XYZ. And the fact that the coach's dad remembered me as I'm just some nobody walk on, like that was always a thing that I always really appreciated, that just being around and just as a person, I don't know, like Cecil's just the best. I don't know where there's not a question. I just want to say that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you weren't isolated, and you know that. I mean, Grant can tell you a story, and Zach can tell you a story, and Steele can tell you. I mean, it was that case with everybody on the team, because he was personable that way. And there was no phony with him. It was all genuine. I think the greatest tribute from any of you players or guys on that staff I got, and I heard I heard from all the coaches that were around Dad and many of the players. But Wally said when he came around, I wanted to pick up my coaching, because he was there watching you. And he said, I just wanted to coach better. When your dad came around, I wanted to coach better because I didn't want to let him down.
Yeah. He's a legend. He's a legend.
Felt the same way.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And being a kicker, dicking around for most of practice, we had a lot of talks with Cecil. And I was like, this guy is awesome.
Yeah.
He didn't know shit about kicking either.
No, he did. He sure acted like he did. Don't we tell him, okay, yeah. So I think that's a good note to end on. We've taken up over an hour of your time. Man, this was fun. I really appreciate you joining us, Coach. And it's always good to talk to you. Always good to hear from you.
And I'm going to say just one thing, and this is, I've just in kind of conversation, we'll have a guest and we'll kind of talk with friends and whatever relatives. And specifically from this is my father-in-law's perspective. So has an avatar of the rest of kind of Iowa State fans, that they were like, I talked to A-Rob and you go, oh, I remember that fun play. And the one comment that I got from my father-in-law regarding this was like, I really like that guy. I hope he's doing really well. Like the wishes that every single time I said we were talking to Coach Rhoads this week, they were always like, man, I hope he's doing really well. I really appreciate when he was here and I wish he was around. Like that was the sentiment that everybody had that when I was having a conversation. So like just as a means, at least anecdotally, that people have a fondness for Paul Rhoads in Ames, and that is still there. So that's what I was going to say too. So before in the off season, we've been interviewing a lot of people, and I sent out a tweet that's like, hey, who do you guys want to interview? Your name was the top name that people suggested. So I hope just the admiration that fans still have for you in Ames. And I know this will probably be our most listened to episode. Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure.
Well, very appreciative. Vicky's enjoyed it. She's been sitting over here listening too.
Hi, Vicky.
Hey, Vicky.
she enjoyed it as well. But we know we accomplished a lot of good in the 7 seasons that we were there. And as I said before, we're very proud of it.
Yeah. No, and I wouldn't have wanted to play for anybody else. So I'm very thankful that I got you for the 3 years, which I would have you for 4th year, but for the 3 years that I had you. So we appreciate your time, Coach. Thanks again. Like I said, taking up over an hour of your time. So we'll let you get back to it. Thank you again.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Coach. And that was Paul Rhoads. Man, it is good to hear from Coach Rhoads. Like I said it in there, but like you can't help but feel kind of just the energy and the passion. It probably comes through in the recording. Like I know it does it just in this like conversational interview, but like I feel like it's probably just kind of buzzing a little bit. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I still feel that way just after it. I still do have such an admiration for him. During college, that's like I said in the interview, that's a time where boys are being turned into men, and I wouldn't have wanted anybody else to lead our team than Coach Rhoads. He is super instrumental in shaping me, molding me when I was really a shithead. Out of high school into college, still a little bit today, but not quite as bad. Yeah, and the thing that's nice, as for me, talking about the honesty part, it's like I jokingly said, like, so my dad is the oldest boy on a 2,000-acre hog and cattle farm who went to the Air Force, who was a wrestler, and then went to construction. So like I grew up with no bullshit, and
probably that's firm handshake.
Very, very steel trap. But like that's what you get with him, and that's the same kind of thing with Yancey, with him, with Wally. Wally's a great shit talker. We got to get some point get Wally on here. And Herman was the same way, and like it was just the experience that you had with that entire staff was very no bullshit. So it was like, you could walk into anybody's office. If let's say you weren't getting as much playing time, and there were times when that was me, and it was like, why am I not playing? And you're going to get an answer of like,
straight.
your blocking is not good enough in the run game, or you're missing cuts XYZ. Like, got it. Like, I know what to work on. And so there was always that, like, what am I doing? Even if I don't want to hear this answer necessarily, you're going to get the answer that's right. And so hadn't changed a bit.
No, tough love, but that's what you need. And it sucks to hear that that's not what's going on now, because it is so, I mean, I feel like kids these days can be soft of, oh, you're going to push me too hard. Well, I'm out of here. I'm going to go play for someone else that's not pushing me hard.
Yeah.
So,
well, Paul Rhoads gave it to you. So, man. I hope everybody enjoyed this one. I mean, that was extra fun for me.
No disrespect to anybody we've had on before. That was my favorite interview we've done yet.
I mean, there's a lot of good ones, but yeah, that was pretty damn good.
I mean, he makes me just want to, run through that door. But every time I talk to Coach Rhoads, every time I see him, I just want to give him a big old bear hug and just squeeze him as tight as I can. And I feel the same after interviewing. So,
all right, I think that's all we got.
Thank you to all of our loyal listeners who are still listening. And as always, remember, adopt, don't shop.